Hey everybody, sorry about that little camera thing. It was in the wrong direction, but welcome to a departure. I would say a complete and simple departure just for a bit from usual routine. Sometimes it's a good idea to break patterns, right? But I had to because Quincy Jones, in an effort to get out word about what he's doing in his latest projects, gave a couple of interviews, one with GQ and the other with Vulture, that in the case of the Vulture interview I just read were so fascinating and so chock with information and things I didn't know. I felt I had to share them in the form of a rendition of my rendition of what he said, think, what I think he sounded like as he was saying it. And the reason why I think this is so important is because we're at a time where information is so much and so dispersed and so compartmentalized that we don't have a really great way, other than storytelling, of imparting from one generation to the next how things have changed or have not, or any great way to have a true conversation about changing where we are. I'm not saying this is going to be the one thing that changes that, no, but I do believe, and I thought downstairs when I was reading this, that it would be a great idea to use this medium to express what he said, because I don't have the video version. I don't know if there is one. There could be. But, and then have at the back end the conversation, you know? Like I said, this is different from my normal audience, which has been controlled by the YouTube algorithms to always expect something about the Raiders Las Vegas every night, and sometimes that's just not doable, and that's not what I built the channel to do. But I digress. What I built the channel to do was talk about the zeitgeist. And this, what I'm about to present, has dominated, I mean completely dominated Twitter today. So here goes, and it starts with my rendition of the interview called "In Conversation," Quincy Jones. I'll show you what it looks like right here. Okay, there. All right, the music legend on the secret Michael Jackson, his relationship with the Trumps, and the problem with modern pop. All right, so here we go. All right, and that's by David Marchesi. Yeah, David Marchesi. So I'm going to put this over here. I'm putting this over here just so I can possibly see your comments as they may pop up, right? All right. It goes like this. It says, in both music and manner, Quincy Jones is always registered, from afar anyway, as smooth, sophisticated, and impeccably well-connected. That's what earning 28 Grammy Awards and co-producing Michael Jackson's biggest selling albums will do. I should also add that for those of you who may think, if you're younger and you're listening to this, hey, I've never heard Quincy Jones music, if you've seen any of the Austin Powers movies, excuse me, the opening, that bump, bump, that's called the Soul Bossa Nova. That's Quincy Jones. So you heard Quincy Jones and just didn't know it. But I digress, all right? But in person, the 84-year-old music industry mosher is far spikier and more complicated. All I've ever done is tell the truth, said Jones, seated on a couch in his palatial Bel Air home and about to dish some outrageous gossip. I've got nothing to be scared of, man. Currently in the midst of an extended victory lap of his turning 85 in March, a Netflix documentary and a CBS special hosted by Oprah Winfrey on the horizon, Jones, dressed in a loose sweater, dark slacks, and a jaunty scarf, talks like he's got nothing to lose. He name drops, he scolds, he praises, and he tells and retells stories about his very famous friends. Even when his words are harsh, he says them with an enveloping charm, frequently leaning over for fist bumps and to tap me on the knee. The experiences I've had, he says, shaking his head in wonder. You almost can't believe it. So here are the questions that form the interview. The first question that the interviewer starts out with is this one. You work with Michael Jackson more than anyone he wasn't related to. What's something people don't understand about him? I hate to get into this publicly, Quincy Jones says, but Michael stole a lot of stuff. He stole a lot of songs. Donna Summer's State of Independence and Billie Jean. The notes don't lie, man. He was as Machiavellian as they come. How so? Greedy, man, greedy. Don't stop till you get enough. Greg Falanges wrote the C section. Michael should have given him 10% of the song. Didn't want to. What about outside music? Is a question. What's misunderstood about Michael? I used to kill him about the plastic surgery, man. He'd always justify it and say it was some disease he had. Bullshit. How much were his problems wrapped up with fame? You mean the way he looked? He had a problem with his looks because his father told him he was ugly and abused him. What do you expect? It was such a, here's the question, or the statement by the interviewer. It was such a strange juxtaposition how Michael's music was so joyous, but his life just seems sadder and more odd as time goes by. And this is Quincy. Yes, but at the end of Michael's problem was propofol, and that problem affects everyone. Doesn't matter if you're famous, Big Pharma makes Oxycontin and all that shit a serious thing. I was around the White House for 8 years with the Clintons, and I learned about how much influence Big Pharma has. It's no joke. What's your sign, man? Pisces. Me too. It's a great sign. Here's another question. You mentioned the Clintons, who are friends of yours. Why is there such a visceral dislike for them still? What are other people not seeing in Hillary, for example, that you see? It's because there is a side of her, when you keep secrets, they backfire. This is the question. Like, what secrets? There's something else I shouldn't be talking about. You sure seem to know a lot, says the interviewer. I know too much, man. What's something you wish you didn't know? Who killed Kennedy? Who did? Chicago mobster San Giancana. The connection was there between Sinatra and the Mafia and Kennedy. Joe Kennedy, he was a bad man. He came to Frank to have him talk to Giancana about getting votes. Now here's the questioner saying, I've heard this theory before, that the mob helped win Illinois for Kennedy in 1960. Quincy says, we shouldn't talk about this publicly. Where are you from? Toronto is the answer. I was at the Massey Hall show. And the questioner says, really? The Charlie Parker concert with Mingus and those guys? Yeah, man. I saw the contract after. The whole band made $1,100. I'll never forget that. At the time, it was just another gig. It wasn't historical, like Woodstock. Tito Puente told me he wanted to go out to that gig. Those festivals aren't my thing. Elon Musk trying to get me to go to Burning Man? No, thank you. But who knew Woodstock would turn out to be? Jimi Hendrix was out there fucking up the national anthem. Here's the questioner. Wasn't Hendrix supposed to play on Guola Martari? Quincy says, he was supposed to play on my album, and he chickened out. He was nervous to play with Toots Thielemans, Herbie Hancock, Hubert Laws, Roland Kirk. Those are some scary motherfuckers. Toots was one of the greatest soloists who ever fucking lived. The cats on my records were the baddest cats in the world, and Hendrix didn't want to play with them. Here's the questioner asks, what did you think when you first heard rock music? Rock ain't nothing but a white version of rhythm and blues, motherfucker. You know, I met Paul McCartney when he was 21. The questioner says, what was your first impression of the Beatles? That they were the worst musicians in the world? They were no-playing motherfuckers. Paul was the worst bass player I ever heard. And Ringo? Don't even talk about it. Don't even talk about it. I remember once we were in the studio with George Martin and Ringo. Had taken 3 hours for a 4-bar thing. He was trying to fix on a song. He couldn't get it. We said, mate, why don't you get some lager and lime and some shepherd's pie and take an hour and a half and relax a little bit. So he did. And we called Ronnie Varel, a jazz drummer. Ronnie came in for 15 minutes and tore it up. Wow. Ringo comes back and says, George, can you play it back for me one more time? So George did. And Ringo says, that didn't sound so bad. And I said, yeah, motherfucker, because it ain't you. And then Quincy says, great guy, though. Hilarious. Then the questioner asks, were there any rock musicians you thought were good? And Quincy responds, I used to like Clapton's band. What were they called? And the questioner says, Cream. Yeah, they could play. But you know who sings and plays just like Hendrix? The questioner says, who? And Quincy says, Paul Allen. And the questioner says, stop it. The Microsoft guy? And Quincy says, yeah, man. I went on a trip on his yacht, and he had David Crosby, Joe Walsh, Sean Lennon, all those crazy motherfuckers. Then, on the last 2 days, Stevie Wonder came on with his band and made Paul come up and play with him. He's good, man. Now the questioner asks, he says, you hang out in these elite social circles and doing good has always been important to you. But are you seeing as much concern for the poor as you'd like from the ultra-rich? No. The rich aren't doing enough. They don't even fucking care. I came from the street, and I don't care about these kids who don't have enough because I'm one of them. The other people don't know it. They don't know what it's like to be poor, so I don't care. The questioner asks, are we in a better place as a country than we were when you started doing humanitarian work 50 years ago? Quincy answers, no, we're the worst we've ever been. But that's why we're seeing people try to fix it. Feminism, women are saying they're not going to take it anymore. Racism, people are fighting it. God is pushing the bad in our face to make people fight back. The questioner says, we've obviously been learning more lately about just how corrosive the entertainment industry can be for women. As someone who's worked in the highest levels for so many years, do all the recent revelations come as a surprise? No, man. Women had to put up with fucked up shit. Women and brothers. We are both dealing with a glass ceiling. Brothers are black men like myself. Questioner. But what about the alleged behavior of a friend of yours like Bill Cosby? Is it hard to square what he's been accused of with a person you know? Quincy says, it was all of them. Brett Ratner, Weinstein. He's a jive motherfucker. Wouldn't return my 5 calls. A bully. What about Cosby, though? What about it, says Quincy. Were the allegations a surprise to you? Quincy says, we can't talk about this in public, man. The questioner says, I'm sorry to jump around. Be a Pisces, says Quincy. Jam. The questioner asks, if you could snap your fingers and fix one problem in the country, what would it be? Quincy answers, racism. I've been watching it a long time, the 30s till now. We've come a long way, we have a long way to go. The South has always been fucked up, but you know where you stand. The racism in the North is disguised. You never know where you stand. That's why what's happening now is good, because people are saying they are racist who didn't used to say it. Now we know. The questioner asks, what's stirred everything up? Is it all about Trumpism? Quincy responds, he says, it's Trump and uneducated rednecks. Trump is just telling them what they want to hear. I used to hang out with him. He's a crazy motherfucker. Limited mentality, a megalomaniac, a narcissist. I can't stand him. I used to date Ivanka, you know. And the questioner says, wait, really? Quincy says, yes, sir. 12 years ago, Tommy Hilfiger, who was working with my daughter, Kira, said, Ivanka wants to have dinner with you. I said, no problem. She's a fine motherfucker. She had the most beautiful legs I ever saw in my life. Wrong father, though. Would your friend Oprah be a good president? Asked the questioner. I don't think she should run, says Quincy. She doesn't have the chops for it. If you haven't been a governor of a state or the CEO of a company or a military general, you don't know how to treat people, how to lead people. And the questioner responds, she is the CEO of a company. And Quincy says, a symphony conductor knows more about how to lead than most business people, more than Trump does. He doesn't know shit. Someone who knows about real leadership wouldn't have as many people against him as he does. He's a fucking idiot. The questioner says, is Hollywood as bad with race as the rest of the country? I know that when you started scoring films, you'd hear producers say things that they didn't want a bluesy score, which was clearly code speak. Are you still encountering that kind of racism? It's still fucked up, said Quincy. 1964, when I was in Vegas, there were places I wasn't supposed to go because I was black. But Frank Sinatra fixed that for me. It takes individual efforts to change things like that, to change things. It takes white people to say to other white people, do you really want to live as a racist? Is that really what you believe? But every place is different. When I go to Dublin, Bono makes me stay at his castle because Ireland is so racist. Bono's my brother, man. He named his son after me. The questioner asks, is U2 still making good music? Quincy shakes his head like this. The questioner asks, why not? I don't know. I love Bono with all my heart, but there's too much pressure on the band. He's doing good work all over the world. Working with him and Bob Geldof on Debt Relief was one of the greatest things I ever did. It'll be up there with We Are the World. Questioner asks, there's a small anecdote in your memoir about how the rock musicians who've been asking to sing on We Are the World were griping about the song. Is there more to that story? It wasn't the rockers, responds Quincy. It was Cyndi Lauper. She had a manager come over to me and say, the rockers don't like the song. I know how that shit works. We went to Springsteen, Hall & Oates, Billy Joel, and all those cats, and they said, we love the song. So I said to Cyndi Lauper, okay, you can just get your shit over with and leave. And she was fucking up every take because her necklace or bracelet was rattling in the microphone. It was just her that had a problem. The questioner comes back with us. He says, what's something you worked on that should have been bigger? And Quincy says, the fuck you talking about? I've never had that problem. They were all big. So questioner says, how about a musician who deserved more acclaim? Quincy says, come on, man. The Brothers Johnson, James Ingram, T. McCampbell, every one of them went straight through the roof. The questioner says, or asks, from a strictly musical perspective, what have you done that you're most proud of? Anything I can feel, that I can notate musically. Not many people can do that. I can make a band play like a singer sings. That's what arranging is, and it's a great gift. I wouldn't trade that for shit. Questioner asks, a few years back, there was a quote you supposedly gave. I couldn't find the source of it, so maybe it's apocryphal, where you dismissed rap as being a bunch of 4-bar loops. Is that an opinion you stand by? Quincy says, that's true about rap. It's the same phrase over and over again. The ear has to have the melody groomed for it. You have to keep the ear candy going because the mind turns off when the music doesn't change. Music is strange that way. You got to keep the ear busy. The questioner asks, is there a sample from the work you did, maybe with Michael, that illustrates what you're talking about? Quincy Jones says, yeah, the best example of me trying to feed the music principles of the past. I'm talking about bebop, like, Babies Be Mine, hums the song's melody. That's Coltrane done a pop song. Getting the young kids to hear bebop is what I'm talking about. Jazz is at the top of the hierarchy of music because the musicians learned everything they could about music. Every time I used to see Coltrane, he'd have Nicholas Chomsky's book. And the questioner responds, yeah, he was famously obsessed with a thesaurus of scales and melodic patterns. That's the one you're talking about, right? Quincy responds, that's right. You're bringing up all the good subjects now. Everything that Coltrane ever played was in that thesaurus. In, in fact, right near the front of that book is a 12-tone example. It's giant steps. Everyone thinks Coltrane wrote that. He didn't. It was Slomsky. That book started all the jazz guys improvising in 12-tone. Coltrane carried that book around until the pages fell off. To which the questioner responds, when Coltrane started to go far out with the music, Quincy says, giant steps. Even further out, says the questioner, like on Ascension. And Quincy says, man, you can't get further than that 12-tone, and giant steps is 12-tone. And the questioner says, but he was playing tonally. And Quincy says, no, no, no. Even that was heavily influenced by Alan Berg. That's as far out as you can get. So the questioner asks, he says, do you hear the spirit of jazz and pop today? Quincy says, no. People gave it up to chase the money. When you go after Ciroc Vodka and Fat Farm and all that shit, God walks out of the room. I have never in my life made music for money or fame. Not even Thriller. No way. God walks out of the room when you're talking about money. You could spend $1 million on a piano part and it won't make you $1 million back. That's just not how it works. So the questioner responds, is there an innovation happening in modern pop music? Quincy says, hell no. It's just loops, beats, rhymes, and hooks. What is there for me to learn from that? There ain't no fucking songs. The song is the power. The singer is the message. The greatest singer in the world cannot save a bad song. I learned that 50 years ago. And it's that single greatest lesson I ever learned as a producer. If you don't have a great song, it doesn't matter what else you put around it. Questioner asks, what was your greatest musical innovation? Quincy says, everything I've done. And the questioner says, everything you've done was innovative? Quincy says, everything was something to be proud of. Absolutely. It's been an amazing contrast of genres. Since I was very young, I played all kinds of music. Bar mitzvah music, Sousa marches, strip club music, jazz, pop, everything. I didn't have to learn a thing to do Michael Jackson. Questioner asks, what would account for the songs that being less good than they used to be? And Quincy says, the mentality of the people making the music. Producers are now ignoring all the musical principles of the previous generations. It's a joke. That's not the way it works. You're supposed to use everything from the past. If you know where you come from, it's easier to get where you're going. You need to understand music to touch people and become the soundtrack to their lives. Can I tell you one of the greatest moments of my life? The questioner responds, of course. Quincy says, it was the first time they celebrated Dr. King's birthday in Washington, D.C. And Stevie Wonder was in charge and asked me to be musical director. After the performance, we went to a reception, and 3 ladies came over. The older lady had Sinatra at the Sands. I arranged that. Her daughter had my album, The Dude, which I might add is an awesome album. And then that lady's daughter had Thriller. 3 generations of women said those were their favorite records. That touched me so much. The questioner asks, I'm trying to isolate what you specifically believe. The problem with modern pop is it the lack of formal music knowledge on the part of the musicians? Quincy says yes. And they don't even care that they don't have it. Questioner responds, well, who's doing good work? Quincy says, Bruno Mars, Chance the Rapper, Kendrick Lamar. I like where Kendrick's mind is. He's grounded. Chance too. And the Ed Sheeran record is great. Sam Smith, he's so open about being gay, I love it. Mark Ronson is someone who knows how to produce. Questioner asks this question. Putting aside the quality of contemporary songs, are there any technical or sonic production techniques that feel fresh? Quincy says, no, there ain't nothing new. The producers are lazy and greedy. And the questioner responds, well, how does that laziness manifest itself? Listen to the music, says Quincy. These guys, they don't know what they're doing. You've got to respect the gift God gave you by learning your craft. Questioner asks, are you as down on the state of film scoring as you are on pop? And Quincy says, it's not good. Everybody's lazy. Alexander Desplat, he's good. He's my brother. He was influenced by my scores. Questioner asks this question. Again, when you say film composers are lazy, what does that mean exactly in this context? Quincy says it means they're not going back and listening to what Bernard Herrmann did. Questioner says, or asks rather, do you see a future for the music business? There isn't a music business anymore. If these people had paid attention to Sean Fanning 20 years ago, we wouldn't be in this mess. But the music business is still full of these old school bean counters. You can't be like that. You can't be one of these back in the day people. The questioner says, or rather asks, you're talking about business, not music, but, and I mean this respectfully, don't some of your thoughts about music fall under the category of back in the day? Mr. Jones responds, music principles exist, man. Musicians today can't go all the way with the music because they haven't done their homework with the left brain. Okay? Music is emotion in science. You don't have to practice emotion because that comes naturally. Technique is different. If you can't get your finger between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 on a piano, you can't play. You can only get so far with technique. People limit themselves musically, man. Do these musicians, do they know tango, macumba, Yoruba music, samba, bossa nova, salsa, cha-cha? And the questioner says, maybe not cha-cha. Marlon Brando used to go cha-cha dancing with us. This is Quincy saying this. Marlon Brando used to go cha-cha dancing with us. He could dance his ass off. He was the most charming motherfucker you would ever meet. He'd fuck anything. Anything. He'd fuck a mailbox, James Baldwin, Richard Pryor, Marvin Gaye. And the questioner asks, he slept with him? How do you know that? And Quincy Jones frowns and says, come on, man. He did not give a fuck. You like Brazilian music? The questioner responds, yeah, but I don't know much beyond George Ben and Gilberto Gil. Quincy says, Gilberto Gil and Caetano Veloso are the kings. You know, I visit the festivals, the Felavasis every year. Those motherfuckers have a hard life. They're tough. They're tough, though. You think our shit in America's bad? It's worse there. Questioner responds, I read that as a young man, you used to carry around a 32. Quincy says, yeah. And the questioner asks, did you ever fire it? Quincy says, yeah. The questioner asks, at what? And Quincy says, just practicing. So the questioner then asks, okay, let me ask you a left field question. In your memoir, there's a section where you talk about, and Quincy says, being a dog. And the questioner says, that's not what I was thinking of, but yeah, that's in there. I was thinking of a section where you describe having a nervous breakdown not long after Thriller. You talk so often about your ups. I'm wondering if maybe you can talk about one of your downs. Quincy says, what happened was that I was a producer on The Color Purple. Steven Spielberg, and I are still great friends, man. He's a great fucking guy. I love working with him. The questioner asks, yeah, but what happened on The Color Purple that caused your breakdown? Quincy says, what happened was that I was a producer on that movie, and everybody went on vacation after we finished filming. Everybody except me. I had to stay home and write an hour and 55 minutes of music for the movie. I was so fucking tired from doing that I couldn't see. I put too much on my plate and it took its toll. You learn from your mistakes, and I learned I couldn't do it again. Now the questioner then asks this. He says, what's the last mistake you learned from? Quincy says, my last record, 2010's Q Soul Bossa Nostra. I was not in favor of doing it, but the rappers wanted to record something as a tribute to me, where they do versions of songs that I'd done over my career. I said to them, look, you gotta make the music better than we did on the originals. That didn't happen. T-Pain, man, he didn't pay attention to the details. The questioner then asked this question. What's something positive you've been feeling about music lately? Quincy says, understanding where it comes from. It's fascinating. I was on a trip with Paul Allen a few years ago, and I went to the bathroom and there were maps on the wall of how the earth looked 1.5 million years ago. Off the coast of South Africa, where Durban is, was the coast of China. The people had to be mixing, and you hear it in the music, in the drums from both places. There are African qualities to Chinese music, Japanese music too. With the koto drumming, it all comes from Africa. It's a heavy thing to think about. The questioner asked this question. He says, you are about to turn 85. Are you afraid of the end? Quincy says, no. The questioner then responds, what do you think happens when you pass? Quincy says, you're just gone. And then the questioner asks, are you religious? Quincy says, no, man. I know too much about it. I knew Romano Mussolini, the jazz piano player, the son of Benito Mussolini. We used to jam all night, and he'd tell me about where the Catholics were coming from. The Catholics have a religion based on fear, smoke, and murder. And the biggest gimmick of the world is confession. You tell me what you did wrong, and it'll be okay. Come on. And almost everywhere you go in the world, the biggest structures are the Catholic churches. It's all money, man. It's fucked up. So the questioner then asks, on the subject of money, I have a crass question. You spent the first half of your career working in jazz, which isn't especially lucrative. When did you start making serious money? Mr. Jones responds this way. He says, when I started producing after Leslie Gore, I was the first black vice president at a record label, Mercury, which is great, except that meant they didn't pay me for producing her. You know how they do. You know your country. But after that, in the 70s, when I started producing for other artists, and then Michael, of course, that made me a lot of money. And big money came from TV producing. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, that was huge for me. Mad TV was on for 14 years. That syndication money is great, man. Questioner asks, how much did your upbringing, the difficulties with your mother and growing up in real poverty, affect how you perceive success? Of course it affected it, says Mr. Jones. I appreciate the shit out of what I have because I know what it's like to have nothing. Then this question, what about having a fractured family? How did that change you? Same as with money, man. I appreciate what I got. How often do you think about your mother? All the time, said Mr. Jones. She died in a mental home. Brilliant lady, but she never got the help she needed. Her dementia praecox could have been cured with vitamin B, but she couldn't get it because she was black. Then the questioner asked this. When you think about her now, what comes to mind? That I wish I could have been closer to her. What happened to her? For kids, that's a bitch. Then this question. What's the most ambitious thing you have left to do? His response, Quest TV. Everybody's excited about it. It's going to be a musical Netflix. It's the best music from every genre around the world. So if kids want to hear something great, it'll be right there for them. I can't believe I still get to be involved in things like this. I stopped drinking 2 years ago, and I feel like I'm 19 years old. I've never been so creative. I can't tell you, man, what a life. And that's it. And so you might be wondering, if you're just tuning in, why I cited this, but because, as I say, first of all, this is, politics, news, sports, and tech, all right? That's what I cover. And at times, particularly with the live stream, less so the other videos, it's a good idea to get out of the rut. And I have 13,000 videos here almost, and they go across the spectrum. I have interviews with William Shatner here. I have a discussion with Richard Dreyfuss. I have like 2 interviews with Richard Dreyfuss. I talk with John Ritter's son, Jason Ritter, about his shows coming. I've got coverage of the NFL draft, of course, Mark Davis, of course. I've got interviews with the vast majority of people in and out of, and then back out of, and then back in Oakland politics. I've got the governor, Jerry Brown, who I worked for. I've got interviews with producers that you have never heard of, movie producers, like Adam Green, but who made a movie that you may have heard of called Hatchet, right? I've got everything here. And it's really important for me to maintain that breadth because I'm Zenny 62. I was born in 62. And the year I was born was the same year that Quincy Jones created the soul bossa nova. And I remarked to start this before you came in that if you've ever heard the soundtrack from Austin Powers or seen any of the movies, the introduction is by Quincy Jones. So even if you didn't know who Quincy Jones was or what Quincy Jones did, there's a very good chance you've heard at some point in your life Quincy Jones music. Unescapable. You can't escape it. But he's also he's about to be 85, real. And what's happened in this society, because we're so compartmentalized, someone only wants to hear about this thing, or they want to hear about that thing, is that mentally we become way too narrow. Once in a while, it's a good idea to open things up. And I really believe that's what this interview does. Because it shows people as they are. People. It's not just that it shows Quincy Jones as he is. Okay? But think about it. Ivanka Trump asked to go out with him. Okay? That was 12 years ago. 12 years ago. Okay? So, you know, that was what? He was 84. That put him at 72. And she asked to go out with him. Ain't bad. So with that, I'll take your comments. Rick Rice says she couldn't get vitamin B because she's black. Yeah. You know, I mean, but it also shows you just how things have come. All right. So, and something else too, you know, I didn't make this, I put this out here again because I want this message seen. There's some videos that aren't going to get a lot of views right now, fine. But what happens is that later when they put up, I mean, it's live stream, but when they go up as videos, whoosh, that happens a lot. There's some things that went up where some of you would remark, oh, there are a lot of people here. And then, you know, about maybe 5 days later, they have 2,000 views. So, you know, that's not the point. The point is, and this is a lesson for those of you who are doing this, to make sure you get out your message. Like, you know, go CSU, you may not be watching this. And I can understand because of the language. I apologize for the language, but sometimes when you are, and I think it's a good lesson, sometimes when you are dealing with reality, you have to deal with the reality as it is, okay? As it's presented to you. And that isn't always pretty. Sometimes the language isn't always pretty. But you have to absorb it to grow. As Joseph Binsman says just now, that was an extremely open interview from Jones. Yeah. And very open, okay? And so, you know, so my point is that's why I did it. So I want to talk about this, and I'm going to discourage anything that doesn't have to do with this. So if you want to kind of bow out and maybe, you know, come back another time, that's cool. But I want to really flesh out what was presented, because too often we think about one thing And we've got to stop doing that because there's so much. I mean, I didn't know that Brando was, I didn't know Brando was that kind of guy, right? I mean, he said that Brando, I mean, think about this. He said that Marlon Brando, I mean, slept with dudes, and I didn't know that. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, maybe some of you did. I did not know that. I'm like, what? Okay. He said he named names. He said James Baldwin, Richard Pryor, and Marvin Gaye. And I'm like, what? And then on TMZ, I think Richard Pryor's sister confirmed that, if I'm not mistaken. I was like, are you kidding me? This is, I'm going to TMZ right now to see if that's front page news, and it may very well be. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff, right? I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, all right? And as Blaylock says, Hollywood has always been like that. That's how you get in. See, Aaron, I didn't know that. And Joseph Benjamin says, yeah, Pryor's widow said Richard Pryor slept with Brando. And I'm blown away. I'm like, are you kidding? What? It's like, this is, wow. I mean, there are two ways to look at that. You can either say, okay, fine, but then you can say, hey, look, if you're like a good guy and just, maybe there's that means that there's somebody out there for you. If there are all these dudes doing stuff like that, that means you can get up, that means the women that they treated like crap or the equivalent today are still looking for a great guy, and you can find the great. If you're the great guy, just stay on the straight and narrow, and you'll get the prize, so the great wife, right? So, Aaron Blaylock says, yeah, I made him an offer you couldn't refuse. My God. And then Joseph Benson says, whatever we know about Vegas and or Hollywood, the real deal must be 10 times more in depth. And Joseph Benjamin, that's exactly the point. And that is that, it's that's saying the truth is always stranger than fiction, right? And that's presented here. The truth is always stranger than fiction. And Rick Rice has heard the same about Brad Pitt and said he had to, boink his way to the top with men. And I'm just learning this for the first time. I'm like, what? I mean, if anything, what's coming out of this is how screwed up Hollywood is in the entertainment industry. It's just like, oh, golly. And just how many things you don't want to do, I guess one had to do or they felt they had to do, okay? Because you always have options in this life. And that's the lesson here. That's the lesson that I want to impart. I don't care what anyone tells you. You do have choices. And you yourself, at the end of the day, decide to stay in an industry like that or deal with people like that, okay? And then if you make the decision that you want to move in that direction, you have to be aware of what it is you're getting into. If you're not, then it's a problem for you and for everybody else. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think the one thing I like about the interview is where Quincy Jones remarks, it was pretty powerful, where he said that God is putting the bad in our face so that we can see it and make things better. Aaron Blaylock says Tupac said he went to see Quincy's daughter and Quincy propositioned him. Oh my God. Joseph Binsman says, have you ever seen the movie LA Confidential? And he says, that kind of touched, this is Binsman writing this, that kind of touched a little bit about a gay actor or person trying to make it in LA, and he was set up to have an affair with a police commissioner. Joseph, I saw LA Confidential, right? But I didn't get that. I mean, because I wasn't socially aware like that, right? I'm just being honest. I wasn't. I've always been a nerd. And a kind of guy, I've always been, book smart kind of guy that wasn't really into the dirtier part or the seamier part of life. And I don't mean to imply that that's dirty or seamy. Someone's going to take that the wrong way. It's just not something that I have been accustomed to for my life. So when LA Confidential came out, I didn't know how to look at it that way. There wasn't anyone saying, "Oh, this is what that meant," right? And I didn't. I think I saw it only once. I watched LA Confidential. Actually, I think I have it at home for one reason. Kim Basinger. I was like, wow, Kim Basinger's in here, right? That was it. So, but I didn't know all the other stuff. I didn't get, at all. Just didn't. So it's fascinating to find out what a person knows and does not know, or what aspect of life they know. And then I think from another perspective, what's important to them. There's some details about life that you have to ask, do they really need to know? In this instance, coming back to what Quincy was talking about, I think it's a good idea to be aware. And I did this with the full knowledge that, Go Warriors is 17. And this presents a side of life that I was thinking, if I recite this, he may never hear it. But then I thought about this another way. I thought, you know what? He could easily see it online, because you can move online easily, right? And it's also real life. So, and it talks about things that happened in Quincy Jones' life that provide a kind of a zeitgeist roadmap for the rest of us. What happened, how to think about what happened. I was talking about my mom, and mom said, yeah, he's right about this, and you didn't realize that? You don't know that jazz is the best music ever? Well, I did know that, right? But you're trying to be contemporary, like, oh yeah, okay. So I think what I'm going to do is I got that out of the way. I've got that done, and I'm going to, hey, ML Scott, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this stream, and I'm going to start a more conventional stream before it gets to 11 o'clock, because 11 o'clock would normally be 8 o'clock, so I'd be right on time. So I did okay. I started an early stream, got this out of the way, and then we can go back to our normally regularly scheduled programming, right? So I will be back, and when I say I will be back, I will be back. You didn't get an alert? Yeah, there's, I want to say something about that. There's some crap going on, because if I have different channels, much smaller, that are subscribed to this channel, and I do that to monitor what kind of alerts I get. If someone puts on a live stream like Go Warriors or Go CSU or anybody else, I don't get that alert either. But I'm also subscribed to Josh Logan, what's his name? Logan Paul. And I get all kinds of alerts. I get a browser alert when he goes up and all this. I get an email alert. I'm thinking, wait a minute, how come I'm getting alerts from this guy and all I did was subscribe? I didn't click the notification bell or anything, okay? So there's some crap going on that YouTube is not being honest about, and they are trying to control who's popular and who isn't. And it's really nasty, and it's really dastardly, and it's really dirty. And that's what you're seeing. So, but at any rate, and so, oh, by the way, M.O. Scott says, I just happened to be watching another YouTube video and said you were live in the right list. Thanks. But see, that's the thing. You find out that I'm live by accident, right? Whereas I hear about, Paul, getting up, putting up a video, right? Boom, right in my face. It comes up in my browser. Logan Paul is live. Logan Paul puts on a video. I'm thinking, why am I seeing this about him when I don't, and I know I did not push anything to cause that kind of notification? That's got me steamed. All right, so let me get out here, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about the latest in, National Signing. Well, I said I was going to talk about National Signing Day tomorrow night, and the results from that, because we're going to have AP come back and talk about that and how Alabama got hosed by Georgia. So tonight, give me 10 minutes. I'll be back with another subject more oriented toward the Raiders. All right, see ya. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. I'll be back 10 minutes. Oh, 10 minutes. Or less.